Millions watched Little House on the Prairie for decades. Millions fell in love with Laura Ingalls and Almanzo Wilder, as sweetly performed by Melissa Gilbert and Dean Butler. Their effortless relationship, their charming looks, their unspoken understanding seemed to transcend acting and convince a good part of the audience that something substantial must have grown between them off-screen. The idea, a murmur of comfort passed down through generations of admirers, suggests a secret love affair and the preservation of the pastoral ideal. Melissa Gilbert, who was the exact image of Laura Ingalls, eventually spoke out at age 61. But what she said was not what so many had expected. The truth was more difficult, more human, more honest than any rumor. It wasn't about the secret love affair, but about the truth she'd kept to herself for so long, and why it took her more than 6 decades to finally share her story, revealing a life far more convoluted than her squeaky clean reputation. When Little House on the Prairie first aired in 1974, few would have guessed it would soon become one of the most beloved family dramas on television. In an age of ever more sophisticated visual effects and attractive escapist storylines, the series was remarkable for its simplicity. The series depicted the stark, unvarnished realities of pioneer living, not romanticized pictures or lavish lifestyles, but the perpetual battle with privation, the enduring ties of family, the solace of faith, and the fortitude required to endure. This was the story of the strong heroine Laura Ingalls. She was a fantastic weave of intransigence, deep feeling, fearlessness, and inexhaustible energy. Her honesty, unusual for TV characters of that time, quickly endeared her to American audiences. She was real, part of the human condition. Melissa Gilbert started filming her role as Laura at the age of 9. You can't teach Melissa's honesty of heart or replicate it, even when she is young. And she laughed, unself-consciously, without restriction, with all the youthfulness. She cried with a real grief or frustration that connected with the audience. She had real scenes with Michael Landon, who played her father, Charles Ingalls, never seen on television. That innate talent propelled her into the national spotlight and made her one of America's most beloved child stars. Her parents believed in her. She looked innocent. The children were charmed by her daring spirit. Melissa's persuasive fraud may have millions of people accepting Laura Ingalls into their homes week after week as an honorary member of the family. Industry veteran Michael Landon apparently spotted Melissa's outstanding instincts quickly, calling her a natural. This sincerity, this true connection, was one of the primary reasons people were drawn to the program and helped cement its place in cultural memory. That glittering lure of celebrity was not without its own pressures. Pressures that few outside the flames of child infamy could really understand, especially for one so young. Gilbert's most difficult years, her most trying youth, were spent in the frenetic, demanding world of television. Those were long and grueling days, shooting from dawn to nightfall. And that's the way of it. She was always working on emotional moments that took her to levels of sensitivity beyond her age. There were constantly adults around her. Producers, directors, photographers, reporters, publicists, who, to varying degrees, demanded professionalism and emotional maturity from a small girl still trying to find herself. The continual inspection, the ever-changing lines between character and self, fostered an internal ambiguity and expectancy. Years later, Melissa said softly but with force, "I grew up in front of the whole world before I even knew who I was." That poignant statement summed up the singular challenge of her early life, a public persona created before a private self could emerge, and the daunting task of self-discovery done under the unblinking gaze of millions. Over the seasons of Little House on the Prairie, viewers saw Laura Ingalls grow from a naughty little girl into a poised young woman. A plot arc that mirrored life allowed the spectator to relate more with the character. Key cast Dean Butler in the role of Almanzo Wilder. His presence subtly but effectively altered the show from a family drama to a fascinating love story. Dean Butler was a calming, warm, steady influence, different from Laura's passionate, impetuous attitude. Their scenes were natural and graceful. They said much without words. Almanzo's compassionate, caring smile, soothing voice, and patient, understanding methods with Laura charmed the fans. And even many years after the show went off the air, viewers still cherish Laura and Almanzo as one of TV's most beloved couples. They enjoyed a great romance without the drama and passion of most of the legendary love affairs, but they were easy and slow. Viewers were touched by Almanzo's respectful, polite attitude toward Laura. This feeling of safety and stability was tied to the spectators emotionally, who perceived an ideal love in their relationship. Laura and Almanzo's love was idealized as pure, stable, and achievable. It was an oasis of kindness in a mad world. Fans ate up this idyllic on-screen romance, but they never realized the depth of Melissa Gilbert's youth during the years these famous love scenes were shot. The public saw Laura Ingalls as a strong young woman on the cusp of adulthood, but Melissa was still attempting to get a hold on the choppy seas of adolescence. Her screenmate, Dean Butler, joined the show as a full-grown adult in his 20s. Melissa was only 15, but acted like an adult. Years later, Melissa would say that it was often difficult and confusing for her to shoot those romance passages that seemed so natural and real to millions. As a teenager, she had to pretend to understand the intricate intricacies of adult emotions and the love tension she hadn't yet experienced. There was none of the sexual tension that the viewers loved, none of the subtle sparks flying between Laura and Almanzo. Finally, after years of rumors, Melissa revealed that Dean Butler was never her secret boyfriend or partner. In fact, in a moment of fragility and uncertainty in her life, she saw him as a secure, elder, caring figure. Dean was the consummate professional and treated Melissa with respect and dignity throughout filming, understanding she was still growing up, not only as a person, but in front of millions of viewers. This basic honesty was a surprise to many of the longtime followers, for the illusion on the screen had always been so real, so believable. But maybe that's why there were rumors of an off-screen relationship for decades. Laura and Almanzo were all comfort, fidelity, and constancy. A love eternal, incorruptible. The intriguing idea that Melissa and Dean had secretly loved each other moved the ideal ahead, so that viewers may feel that such an idealized romance could exist outside the television set. As fans throughout the country swooned over the fictional secret romance behind the scenes of Little House on the Prairie, the real-life love story of Melissa Gilbert, considerably more intricate and emotionally volatile, discreetly played out elsewhere in her life. This real-life story did not end in the comforting, idealistic fairy tale viewers imposed on her image of film, but in sadness and immense emotional pain. In the early 1980s, at the zenith of youth culture and Hollywood glamour, she fell madly and passionately in love with Rob Lowe, a rising star who was rapidly ascending to become one of Hollywood's most captivating and gifted young elite. Lowe was at that time one of the most sought-after young entertainers in America, his dazzling beauty and engaging personality putting him in a frenzy of attention and adulation. Melissa and Rob were one of the most talked-about young couples in Hollywood. You couldn't go by a magazine rack without seeing their youthful beauty and evident chemistry staring back at you. They were hailed as the perfect match, a golden couple made for eternity. Their relationship was much more unstable and insecure than anyone outside of their inner group could have imagined, beneath their brilliant public image and frenzied tabloid headlines. Their growing employment and susceptibilities made for instability. In 1983, at the apex of their Brat Pack success, and with a new generation of young, powerful Hollywood actors on the rise, Robert Lowe proposed to Melissa. It was a turning point for her, a promise of the permanency and security she had searched for all her life, consciously or not. A need that dated back to her early years. Friends who saw her at the time say she was full of hope, sparkling, with a bright and secure future ahead of her. She spoke with enthusiasm of her desire for children, for a tranquil, loving family, away from the instability and mental turbulence that had plagued her so long. But that illusion, so carefully built, that bright idea of a firm future, was shattered in 1986. Hoping to solidify their relationship and create the family she so desired, Melissa enthusiastically informed Rob she was pregnant. But it was worrisome he'd admitted openly that he wasn't ready to be a husband and father. Such discovery altered life so much that the relationship could not withstand this revelation. Then the separation, which was painful, and another major loss with Melissa's miscarriage. She lost her sweetheart and the baby she was expecting at the same time, sadly. After these two huge losses, she fell into deep grief. Later, she would talk of the time she sat in her own home, alone, staring at the walls in silence, trying to comprehend how quickly and completely what she had planned for her future had disappeared. She had thought she was going to start the family she had always wanted just weeks earlier, but now everything was empty and meaningless, and she floated in agony. Years later, Gilbert still considers it one of the darkest, most terrible times of her life. After the mental pain, she slipped into self-destructive behavior that was impossible to control. Her anguish intensified, her drinking increased, an attempt to deaden it. She pushed herself into socializing, into wild abandon, into a desperate urge to distract herself. The childhood horrors she had kept bottled up for years suddenly came out and took over her life. Later, Melissa would confess, "I spent years trying to fill holes inside of me." The image she had so carefully built of the wholesome prairie girl, the innocent and virtuous embodiment that had endeared her to millions, was silently and painfully dissolving to reveal the abyss between the woman millions adored and the woman she was. She kept sinking, and she found a horrific rock bottom. Melissa recalled getting intoxicated and passing out, trying to build a doghouse for her kids. This image of the beloved Laura Ingalls, drunk and failing at parental care, was a stark contrast to all that the lovely, ideal life her legions of followers always assumed she was living. She told her anecdote publicly, and others laughed, maybe out of a sense of shame, or a fearful inability to comprehend the significance of the incident. But there was enormous misery and anguish behind the laughter. Melissa Gilbert wasn't simply a typical Hollywood starlet living the good life. Inside, she was breaking apart, her inner world in chaos. Yet she still held on to the neat and tidy facade of America's prairie girl. Maybe that's why her story is so heartbreaking, so tragic. Laura Ingalls embodied the virtues of steadfast family values, of steadfast love and emotional security. Yet Melissa herself was quietly, desperately yearning for those same qualities in her own life. A tragic paradox that defined much of her early adulthood. Melissa Gilbert carried a complex web of mental scars that would unwittingly shape her future and decisions. She was born in Los Angeles in 1964 and adopted shortly after birth. She was adopted into a family with ties to the colorful, often volatile world of entertainment, and had opportunities that most people could only dream about. But from an early age, she experienced abandonment, a deep fear of being unwanted. She was enveloped in wealth and opportunity, yet she harbored a profound fear of rejection and instability, an undercurrent of discomfort beneath her exterior assurance. Her adoptive parents broke up when she was young, and this didn't help her already emotionally difficult landscape. She had multiple stepfathers, which made it difficult for her to maintain emotional stability or to attach with anyone. Melissa would later admit that as a child, she'd attempted to please adults intensely, almost desperately. She was driven by a deep dread of being unloved and left behind, a worry that sprang from memories of being abandoned when she was very young. That profound, enduring fear went with her, quietly into adulthood. Quietly, but firmly impacting many of her relationships and acts in ways she may not have understood. And then she got an amazing insight that made her see her past in a different perspective, to reevaluate it. Melissa lost her adoptive father, Paul Gilbert, when she was 11. She bought his stroke excuse for years. The story ended in a comforting, if imperfect, conclusion. Years later, she would discover out that her father had committed suicide because he was in significant physical and emotional suffering. It was a psychological bomb that blew out a childhood memory that was built so carefully. Now, many of her most beloved memories of childhood were tinged with secrets and half-truths, and she began to doubt everything her past. The horrible finding made her go over much of her own past again, to see occurrences and relationships in a new and painful light, to deepen scars which she had suffered for years, not knowing whence they had come from, or how they would affect her life. In those tender, formative years of her life, losing her adoptive father. The dark shadows of abandonment. Michael Landon slowly became one of the most important persons in Melissa's life. To a vast television audience, he was the mesmerizing actor playing Charles Ingalls, the wise, faithful, and unconditionally loving father who patiently guided Laura through the natural fears, heartbreaks, and awkward growing pains of adolescence with bountiful affection. Their on-screen partnership became one of the most cherished father-daughter combinations on television, a symbol of family love. Behind the cameras, they were steadily building a more personal, more intimate friendship. Michael Landon became the surrogate father, filling the emotional void created by the death of Paul Gilbert. Melissa was spending a lot of time with Michael and his family, visiting their house, and receiving a warm, steady, and real devotion that she rarely encountered in her stormy existence. Michael was no typical Hollywood grown-up. He looked after her with care, paternally. He could see immediately that below the glitz of child celebrity was simply a young girl trying to pull it together and deal with her fears. Years later, Melissa added cheerfully, "Michael filled a huge hole in my life. Laura and Charles Ingalls' strong, evident love was no game. It was real, reciprocal commitment. To believe in him was a rare and lovely thing in her youth." Later, Melissa delivered a poignant story that touched Michael Landon's soul and showed how much he had touched so many lives. In an emotionally charged situation, Melissa would often forget her lines and stammer. She lost it. She felt like she was failing. The shame, the pressure. Michael saw that she was uncomfortable, and he stopped filming and asked everyone to leave the set politely but firmly so she could have space. In that moment of comfort and openness, Melissa started to cry, thinking she had fucked up, that her professional shortcomings were forever. He stayed with her for several minutes, soothing rather than punishing. He led her through the scenario line by line, regaining her calm and, more crucially, her confidence. That modest, telling act of kindness displayed a patience, a sensitivity, and a deep understanding of the fragile state of a child's psyche, not frequently seen in Hollywood. Yet even this tight and intimate relationship was not without its faults and disappointments. Michael Landon divorced his wife for a younger co-worker, causing a major breach. Melissa felt personally betrayed. The guy she had come to trust as a father figure, a rock in the stormy sea of her life, had done something that mirrored her own childhood instability and emotional unreliability. He was hard to forgive, and she cast him out of her life for years, a dreadful estrangement from someone so dear to her. Fate brought them together in his last terrible years, a heart-rending reunion just in time. A bleak prognosis. In 1991, Michael Landon was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. After a few months, he was gone. It was a very personal tragedy for Melissa, a heartbreaking reminder of losses she had suffered in the past. She had to grieve, truly, for another person who had given her emotional footing and security, had once again disappeared from her life. Melissa's emotional problems were getting complicated, and it wasn't just a case of being sad anymore. And even when Little House on the Prairie was over, she was still a household name. But the transition from beloved kid star to renowned adult performer is a rough one, and she had a hard time with it. Hollywood producers still saw her as Laura Ingalls and typecast her into films that didn't question her growing identity. Her viewers still considered her as the innocent, wholesome, and morally upstanding personification of her prairie role. Melissa was growing up, becoming a woman, struggling to establish a selfhood separate from that omnipresent, almost unavoidable public character. Like many former child stars, she struggled with the expectations of the public, which frequently made it difficult for her to express herself. Melissa has had various plastic procedures to get rid of the prairie girl appearance and to bring out her adult uniqueness. She changed her look to match her inner turmoil, attempting to reinvent herself as a performance artist and motivational speaker. But for all these external improvements, she still had the look of a child who never felt good enough, or wanted, or safe. These reinventions were sometimes stunning, but frequently appeared like superficial reactions to profound internal tensions. Melissa was originally married to the actor Bo Brinkman. She'd hoped marriage and children would give her the secure family life she'd always wanted, a refuge from the emotional turbulence of her past. Melissa worked hard to give the couple a traditional, secure, and supportive family after they had a child. Emotional pressure and betrayal ruined the marriage, no matter how she tried. The next divorce was a painful wake-up to the devastation of the future she had so carefully planned, a future she imagined would bring her the stability she so needed. When she married the actor Bruce Boxleitner for the second time, she was able to experience a more stable and long-lasting connection than she had in her first marriage. They also had children from previous marriages, as well as a son named Michael, who was named after Michael Landon, who was Melissa's surrogate father. In addition, they had children from previous marriages. For as long as she can remember, Melissa has been under the delusion that she has achieved the perfect balance between her personal life and her professional life. A sense of connection was something that she possessed, in addition to the fact that she had a vocation. However, the emotional distance that existed between them and the anguish that was being kept hidden from each other could no longer be maintained by their closed doors, which was causing their relationship to become increasingly strained. In the aftermath of the dissolution of the marriage, which had lasted for 16 years, Melissa found herself confronted with the loneliness that she had spent her entire life attempting to avoid. The life of this girl was getting even more complicated by the time she was 50 years old, and she started having major problems with her physical health. Her life was much more complicated. She had a lot of hard treatments, and she was in a lot of pain, and she had years of employment and life accidents to get to the target of mending her spine. Melissa broke a vertebra in her lower back during a 6-month period while playing on stage as part of the Little House on the Prairie tour. She was in so much pain, she didn't realize the extent of her injuries until she saw a doctor. Later, she would suffer from a concussion and spinal cord difficulties, since she participated in Dancing with the Stars, which was a burden for her body. The recuperation was grueling, both physically and mentally. Those years of sorrow were also years of immense personal development, which is a curious twist of fate that occurred throughout those years. In order to escape the demanding and frequently superficial entertainment world, Melissa made a deliberate and planned decision to leave the profession. The pressures of Hollywood, the expectations of the public, and the years of mental torment she endured throughout her career had led her to the point where she was fed up with all of these things. She has made the decision to live a life that is less flashy and more anchored in reality. And she has made this decision in conjunction with her husband, Timothy Busfield. By accepting her aging process, letting go of the impossible beauty standards of Hollywood, and letting go of the relentless quest of retaining her youthful appearance, she was able to find her freedom in this new chapter of her life. The fact that she was open and honest about her issues with mental health, her recovery from addiction, and her emotional healing was the most important contribution that she made. I was able to discover a sense of calm. To paraphrase what Melissa had to say about the matter, I stopped trying to be perfect and accepted myself at the same time. When it came to her physical attractiveness, Melissa Gilbert gave the impression that she couldn't care less about what other people thought of her. At this point, it was no longer required to make certain that the information was verified by an additional source. She was not shy about discussing the difficulties she had, and she freely stated that her weaknesses were an integral part of who she was. She did not hold back from confiding in others about her troubles. At that very instant, she took the decision to pursue inner quiet, physical and mental wellness, and genuine emotional honesty, rather than the fleeting accolades that Hollywood was known for. She did this because she wanted to be independent of the industry. Over the course of several decades, Melissa Gilbert has undergone a remarkable transformation and embarked on a journey of self-discovery. As a result, she is now an entirely different person than the woman that viewers saw when she was a young child. This is due to the fact that she has been able to discover who she truly is. It has been claimed by Melissa Gilbert, who is 61 years old, that she does not want to have perfect illusions or pleasant Hollywood fancies at this moment. In a statement, she offered her expression of this sentiment. As a result of the exercise, she came to the realization that the truth, despite the fact that it might be difficult to understand, was more valuable than manufactured perfection. It was over the course of the process that she came to this realization. Her candor about her connection with Dean Butler and the romance between Laura and Almanzo is likely the reason why a considerable number of people are now able to relate to her. It is also possible that this is the reason why she is able to relate to them. It is also possible that this is the reason why she is able to relate to him through this particular circumstance. The genuine story of Melissa Gilbert's life was never going to be about a covert love affair that took place behind the scenes of Little House on the Prairie. This was never going to be the case. There was no way that this could ever be the case. At the end of the day, it was a story about a young girl who had spent the majority of her life trembling with fear and wishing for the same love, safety, and belonging that people saw on television and watched over and over again. Her goal was to be able to view the same things that other people are watching on television. A fantasy of Laura and Almanzo, which was a picture of safety, consistency, and a love that never changed, was believed by the fans throughout the course of several decades. This fantasy created a vision of a relationship that was unchanging. A vision of love that was unchanging was what this daydream was all about. Melissa Gilbert put in a lot of effort behind the camera, in the limelight of her difficult life, in an effort to find the emotion that she was wanting or missing out on. However, she was unable to locate it. It is probable that this is the reason why her narrative continues to reverberate for such a significant amount of time after it was initially disclosed. Although her life was never perfect, it is not correct to state that it was perfect because of the fact that it was never perfect. Hidden beneath all of the dazzling celebrity and bright smiles and soothing TV nostalgia was a woman who was quietly and heroically suffering from a tragic loss, an agonizing loss, and years of emotional uncertainty while attempting to negotiate the hazardous path of growing up in public. She was doing this while attempting to navigate the treacherous path of growing up in public by herself. In contrast, she was struggling to traverse the treacherous route of growing up in public when she was in her teenage years. There is a good chance that in this age of authenticity, straightforward honesty is more convincing than any rumor or dream that has been skillfully crafted. Due to the fact that honesty is the only thing that can represent the truth, this is the case. Throughout the course of her life, Melissa Gilbert has been on a trip that has been filled with survival, healing, and ultimately, the freeing path of learning to finally stop pretending and embrace herself. Melissa Gilbert's story is one that has stood the test of time and is true. The glorified love that Laura Ingalls and Almanzo Wilder shared, which viewers may never forget, stands in stark contrast to this, which stands in stark contrast to the romanticized love that they shared.